Portugal's hopes rest on Cristiano Ronaldo's shoulders. Ronaldo.
For more than 2 decades, one man refused to accept the limits of age, criticism, or even history itself. While legends came and went, while pundits declared him finished more times than anyone could count, Cristiano Ronaldo kept going. But in the summer of 2026, standing on the biggest stage football offers, he finally said the words the world had been dreading. What happens when the man who redefined a sport tells you, out loud, that the clock has finally caught him? Before the trophies, before the glory, the roaring stadiums and chants on the streets, before his face became instantly recognizable all over the globe, there was a boy on the island of Madeira who grew up in a cramped, tin-roofed home, one of 4 children in a family that had almost nothing to spare. His father worked as a kit man for a local club, tending to other men's boots, while his own son dreamed in silence in the stands. Money was tight enough that dinners sometimes went without meat, and ambition felt like a luxury few people around him could afford. As a child, he was small for his age, wiry and restless, the kind of kid who couldn't sit still unless there was a ball at his feet. At just 12 years old, Ronaldo left home. He said goodbye to his mother, his sisters, the warmth of the only life he had known, and moved alone to the mainland to join Sporting Lisbon's academy. He arrived in a city that felt enormous and indifferent, surrounded by boys who already spoke with the confidence of people who belonged there. Homesickness nearly broke him more than once. Teammates remember a small, skinny kid who cried at night, who kept a photograph of his family close, who somehow turned that ache into fuel on the training pitch every single morning. He wasn't the biggest. He wasn't even universally seen as the most gifted, but something in him refused to accept being ordinary. And that refusal became the quiet engine underneath everything he would go on to build. That refusal would define everything that came next. At Manchester United, a raw teenager with dazzling feet and an almost reckless love of showmanship slowly transformed into a ruthless goal machine under Sir Alex Ferguson's watch. Ferguson saw the flair and sanded it down into something sharper, teaching a boy obsessed with tricks to become obsessed with results instead. At Real Madrid, he became something closer to myth, breaking scoring records that had stood for generations and dragging his team to Champions League after Champions League, often when the occasion seemed to demand exactly that from him and no one else. At Juventus, in the twilight of what many assumed would be a slow decline, he kept scoring, kept winning individual honors, kept proving that his body simply didn't age the way everyone else's did. And with Portugal, he lifted the European Championship in 2016, playing through injury and coaching from the sideline in tears, a captain in every sense of the word, even when his legs couldn't carry him onto the pitch. No conversation about Ronaldo is complete without the man who chased him every step of the way. For nearly 2 decades, Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo pushed each other toward heights neither might have reached alone. Messi, the quiet magician, weaving through defenders like the ball was an extension of his own foot, scoring goals that looked almost accidental in their simplicity. Ronaldo, the relentless machine, sculpting his body and his mentality into a weapon through sheer force of will, scoring goals that looked engineered, rehearsed, willed into existence. Messi led with instinct, an artist who barely seemed to notice the crowd. Ronaldo led with intensity, a competitor who fed off every doubt thrown his way and used it as evidence in a case he was building against the world. Where Messi glided, Ronaldo attacked. Where Messi disappeared into quiet brilliance, Ronaldo demanded the spotlight and then justified standing in it. Fans picked sides, argued for years over bar stools and comment sections about who was truly the greatest, but in truth, football itself was the winner. An entire generation got to watch 2 once-in-a-lifetime talents collide, season after season, and somehow both kept getting better simply because the other existed. Each one a mirror the other couldn't look away from. Ask anyone who has trained alongside Ronaldo, and they'll tell you the same thing. The obsession never stopped. Ice baths before sunrise, extra reps after everyone else had gone home, and the lights in the training ground had already been switched off. A diet monitored down to the gram, a sleep schedule treated like a competitive advantage rather than an afterthought. In past interviews, Ronaldo has said his greatest gift was never talent. It was work ethic, an unwillingness to let a single day pass without getting better than he was the day before. He has spoken about visualizing success before it happens, about treating his body like a machine that requires maintenance rather than luck, about the loneliness of caring more than everyone around him. That mindset became almost as famous as his goals, inspiring millions of young athletes who had nowhere near his ability but everything to learn from his discipline. Proof that obsession, applied consistently over decades, can close the gap that talent alone leaves open. His reach stretched far past the pitch. He became one of the most followed humans on the planet, a walking billboard before brands even had to ask, moving markets and headlines with a single photo. He built businesses, hotels, a clothing line, a fitness empire, all while quietly funding hospital treatments for children he never publicized. Stories that only surfaced years later, almost by accident. Kids in Legos, in Jakarta, in Sao Paulo, grew up mimicking his celebration before they'd even seen a full 90 minutes of him play. He changed how footballers trained, how they marketed themselves, how seriously an athlete could take their body as a long-term asset, rather than something to be used up and discarded. Whether people love him or resent his confidence, nobody can ignore him. That, in itself, is its own kind of legacy, one built as much off the pitch as on it. Then came the 2026 FIFA World Cup. At 41 years old, Ronaldo walked out for his 6th World Cup, a feat almost nobody in the sport's history has matched. Doubters whispered that this would finally be the tournament where age won, where the machine ran out of parts. Instead, in the group stage against Uzbekistan, he found the net twice, becoming the first player ever to score in 6 separate World Cup tournaments, a record that may never be threatened again, given how rare it is for any player to still be performing at the top level 2 decades into a career. For a moment, watching him celebrate with the same wide-armed intensity as he did as a 21-year-old debutant in 2006, it felt like time itself had agreed to wait a little longer. But football rarely lets its stars choose the ending on their own terms. On July 5th, the day before Portugal's round of 16 clash with Spain in Arlington, Texas, Ronaldo sat before the cameras and said the sentence millions had feared. "This will be my last World Cup." He said it without dramatics, almost peacefully, adding only that he hoped it wouldn't be his last game just yet. There was no bitterness in his voice, no plea for sympathy, just a man who had given the sport everything he had, finally being honest, out loud, about the road ahead of him. The next night, under the lights in Dallas, Portugal fought for every inch against a relentless Spanish side, chasing their own redemption. Chances came and went on both ends. Ronaldo himself had a shot on goal early, a flicker of the old fire that made the crowd rise, even though nothing came of it. But deep into stoppage time, with the match feeling destined for penalties, Spain's Mikel Merino found the breakthrough off the bench, and the scoreboard read Portugal 0, Spain 1. Just like that, after 20 years and 6 tournaments, the World Cup story of Cristiano Ronaldo was over. He stood on the pitch afterward, visibly gutted, a competitor who had simply run out of tournament. When reporters pressed him on what came next, he stayed measured, almost guarded, saying it had been his last World Cup. Yes, but that he would need time to reflect and be with his family before deciding anything more. He did not announce retirement from football. He did not announce retirement from Portugal. He simply closed one chapter and left the rest of the story unwritten. Still under contract with Al Nassr through 2027. Still, by his own admission, not ready to let go of the game he has spent his entire life mastering. And maybe that's the most human part of this whole story. Not a clean, cinematic goodbye, but an ending that mirrors real life. The boy from Madeira, who once cried himself to sleep in a stranger's city, grew into a man who rewrote what a football career could look like, then walked away from its biggest stage without fully walking away from the sport itself, still keeping the world guessing about what comes next. His numbers will likely never be touched. Most international goals in the history of men's football. Most caps ever earned for a single nation. 6 World Cups played across 4 different decades of his life, a record that may stand for generations, simply because so few bodies could withstand what his did. But numbers were never really the point. The point was a mentality that refused to accept limits, a discipline that turned a frightened kid into arguably the most recognizable athlete alive, and a career that gave 2 generations of fans something to measure greatness against, whether they were cheering for him or against him. Somewhere, right now, a child is practicing free kicks in an empty street, imagining the roar of a crowd that doesn't exist yet. They don't know his name yet, but because of what Cristiano Ronaldo built, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, they believe it's possible. And maybe that, more than any trophy, more than any record, is the legacy he leaves behind. If you watched to this point, hit subscribe so you never miss the next one.